just because we were hoping to get you know, a little bit better effect. So one of the things I would strongly suggest to any pipe band is that make sure your scores are sound. Okay? Now, I've been writing scores for over 40 years, and I can tell you that the hardest scores to write are the ones I put together for the Robert Malcolm Memorial Band, Grade 5 and Grade 4. Grade 3, not quite as challenging, but 5 and 4, really challenging. Why? Well, what can they play at Grade 5 level? That's the big question. You know, like they've got a limited box of tricks, and so you want to delve into that, and you want to get them playing stuff that's interesting, that they think is cool to play, and that they can realistically play. It gets a little bit easier when you go to Grade 4 level, because drummers should be able to play at least a little bit more on the technical, the demanding aspect of it, the things that they can play in Grade 5. When I do write scores, I take very strongly into consideration how difficult is the pipe tune. Now, for those of you who don't know me as well as others, I don't play bagpipes. I've never had the slightest interest in being able to play bagpipes, but I love to play drums to music that's played on the bagpipes. So when I'm looking at a tune that I'm going to compose a score to, I speak to my piping friends and talk to them about the tune to find out the degree of difficulty. And then I try and write a drum score that would be comparable to the piping tune. So for example, if you take a tune like Scotland the Brave, very easy, simple tune. I only have one score for Scotland the Brave, and we all play it. So the Grade 1 guys play it, so do the Grade 2 guys, so do the Grade 3 guys, so do the Grade 4 guys, so do the Grade 5 guys. Because funnily enough, the pipers play the same tune as well. Okay, so I don't see why you would take something and try and put something intricate together to something that's simple. I would rather try and get something simple that goes to a simple tune, and then as tunes get more difficult, then it opens up the door in terms of things that you can do. So I think that how to improve your drum corps, get good scores. Okay, and I hope, I'm not meaning to offend anybody here, but I would say that far too many pipe bands around the world, the drum corps are playing material that's inappropriate for either the tune or for the level that the band is playing in. I find that everywhere I go. Sometimes it's cringeworthy. Probably one of the reasons why I don't judge very much, because I don't find it, I find it the least enjoyable thing that I do. I get asked to do when it comes to pipe banding. So get good material. Finding good material. There isn't a lot of published books, as you probably all know, but you're all connected on the internet somehow. So you can always reach out to someone and get scores. Get someone who is sound, and you all know who the sound people are, and you also probably all have a very good idea who the used car salesmen are amongst the pipe band world, just like anything else. Okay, nobody likes to, you know, buy a car from a dodgy car dealer or person. So all I'm saying is that there's a lot of that goes on, and you don't have to go that route. It's quite easy. And I know in speaking to my peers, several of them that I work with on and off throughout the year, they would firmly agree with that getting the right material and playing it is of the utmost importance. Okay. A small sidebar story to that would be, several years ago, we were going through one of those transitional years where the Robert Malcolm Grade 3 band had lost all its players that were too old to continue to play in the juvenile band. So we moved up the best players from the grade 4 band to the grade 3 band, and then we moved up the beginner, fresh newbie types from the beginner grade 5 level into the grade 4 band. So by the end of the season, I was really, really annoyed. And what I was annoyed about is I was annoyed because the grade 4 kids had been winning every single week throughout the summer. Now you might think, well, why would you be annoyed? Well, the reason I was annoyed is because I wanted them to work harder. And I figured if they were getting clobbered by other bands in the grade, it would make them work harder. Well, that didn't happen. So by the last competition of the year, I decided to go and listen to the grade 4 competition. And what I found out is that all summer long, the kids hadn't beaten anybody. But all the adult bands beat themselves. There was just no way that the kids were going to lose because the other bands were doing everything wrong. Some of them were doing a few things wrong that were enough to influence how a competition would come out, and some of them were doing so many things wrong, it was like, well, where do you begin? So I always remember that. I was like, my goodness. And, you know, I can see sometimes where some bands can get a little secluded. We live in a very big continent. Canada's actually bigger than the US, as some of you might know. And there's less people. We only have 40 million people here, so we got a lot of empty space, and you've got a lot of empty space as well. And so there sometimes can be an excuse for not being able to get people together, but I think the modern world that we live in now, the internet has kind of shrunk that and made it all doable. So getting all your drummers together, getting them playing appropriate scores, get them understanding how the stuff should be played. Most likely, most grade 5, 4, 3 and into grade 2 should all have someone who they're consulting with, okay? Unless you're playing in a grade 3 band with someone with bags of experience who's played at a higher level and has been doing it for a while. You can, you know, it kind of like having a player coach, you could call it, you know. But I think that for example, if I were to ask Jim to poll everybody that's attending the meeting tonight and ask them how many tunes are the band that you're playing in, how many of them have been written by the pipe major of the band in the last few years, I think we'd probably find that the answer to that is probably less than a dozen. So a dozen tunes from 50 pipe bands or something like that. And the reason for that is there's all these published tunes out there. People just go for the tunes and you can find them. So there isn't the same as I mentioned earlier as far as books go, but you can get good scores to go to tunes if you just reach out in the right direction. It's not very hard to find out how to do that. So moving in the right direction, playing appropriate grade level material. More isn't better, sometimes less is more, and so that by virtue of that, less can be better. And making sure that you have reliable people in the right places. You know, like the three most important people in the band, in any pipe band, are the pipe major, the lead drummer, and the bass drummer. Okay, now I'm sure every band that you're in right now, you wouldn't want maybe necessarily to say that to your pipe sergeant because he'll probably be crushed. But anybody can be the pipe sergeant in a band, really. It doesn't carry anywhere near the responsibility that being the lead drummer does or the bass drummer does. If you do not have a good bass drummer, you will struggle. If you don't have a good lead drummer, you will struggle. A lead drummer needs to be someone who can play strong and play well with the pipe major and with the pipe section, and who can play scores that are well set at the appropriate level, and on you go. So that would be what you need to get there. As far as scores go at appropriate levels, there are certain things that that should be taken into consideration. So as you go up the grades, the things that you find in drum scores increase in their intricacy and their bravado, shall we say. Okay? So, for example, I come across bands who play in grade 4 and I find 4-stroke roughs in the score, either traditional or Swiss. And I always get a smile about that because I haven't actually met a grade 4 drummer, a pure grade 4 drummer that is, that can actually play a good Swiss rough. Okay, and so when you go from trying to attain a sound like this, you collectively get something that sounds like this, because there's no detail when you play together. So little things like that, like what should be in scores at this level, what should be in scores at that level. The easiest drum scores I find to write are these scores that I write for SFU. I just put anything I like in it. If the guys can't play it, it's not my problem. Just, what do you mean you can't play it? Well, I guess you can't play it. That's kind of how it goes. I don't mean that in a sort of, you know, Yahoo kind of sort of a way. It's just like, it's easy to write a score at that level when you're writing for people who can play really, really well. One of the things I think that's very important is that everybody in the drum corps needs to know how the tune goes. Everybody in the drum corps needs to know how the tune goes. Okay? Not just the pipers. Okay? Now, how a tune goes, pipe tunes are pretty simple. There's only 9 notes on the register, and most of them are really not very complicated. But when you're getting a tune, and there should, when anybody's learning new stuff, you should have copies of the music. You should have a copy of the music being played by the lead drummer or the coach / tutor of the drum section, so you can hear how they're expected to be played properly. And you should have perhaps a recording with them being played by a piper, so that you can hear how they fit the pipe tune. And also you should have a copy of how the tune is played, so you can listen to it and play the drum score to the tune. Okay? In pipe band music, there are 2 fundamental things that make us different from other drummers. Technically speaking, the prowess in which we play a roll is held in higher esteem than in other genres. The smoothness of a roll is the very foundation of what makes a pipe band drummer. On the musical aspect of things, we drum to the melody. We have a melodic form of drumming. So for example, when you play, you know, if you listen to anybody playing in a rock and roll band or anything, they're and they're just playing along. Does it fit? Absolutely, it fits great. Okay, if you listen to a marching band like a DCI type of band or a university or high school band, they play very rhythmically to the tunes that the band has picked, and it all works. But we play very melodically, and so you have to know how the tunes go if you're going to bring out the best in the tunes. It's definitely more than other genres, although something tells me that Ringo Starr knew the words and the melody to every song that the Beatles wrote. I also think that not just because he's the lead singer in the band, that Don Henley absolutely knows how every song goes that the Eagles play. Okay? And any drummer in any band would know how a tune goes before they play it, or a song. Okay? And then once you know how the tune goes, you can start crafting how you're going to get your hands around the score and play that score to the tune. That's an absolute fundamental. You cannot stand there and be unable to hum the tune. Now, I teach a lot of people, youngsters, who, when I ask them, do you know how the tune go? They always say yes. And I say, so can you hum it? Now, a lot of people don't want to hum it because they don't want to be sort of embarrassed. And so I encourage all to hum a little bit, but make sure you're internalizing it. And I would say that my success rate with that is very high, because I know that they couldn't play the tunes as well as they are if they couldn't do that. So getting on the tune is really, really, really important. Okay? In popular music, a tune has words. In pipe band music, a tune has drumming. And the drumming of a pipe tune is in no small way attached to that tune like words are to a song. Okay? And sometimes, it's the words that make the song, So you can pick your favorite genres and, kind of go along. But in order to play along to pipe band tunes, you need to know how the tunes go. It's just an absolute. So if there's anybody here and they don't know, then you need to go and learn the tunes, and then you'll find that a lot of little things in the drum scores will start to make a little bit more sense once you do that. Okay. Jim, is there any questions that you want to throw at my way before we continue, or anybody?
No, I'll leave it open to the group here. If somebody has a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. I think the point about playing material everybody in the corps can handle is a huge one, though.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
My name is Brian Key, and in terms of the way dynamics, the way that you want something done and sound, and where the emphasis is in the music, I've been working with you for a while, and I feel that I have a good understanding what needs to be played heavy, soft, crescendoed. How do you translate that in your energy to the rest of the line? Is it crescendos and decrescendos on the page, or is it just everyone knows what to do?
Well, when I'm working with groups of people, like if I hand out a score to the SFU guys, they'll pretty much nail the dynamics to about 90 to 95% accuracy. Now, the other 5% comes because they don't know which way I might go with a certain score, and then the other part of that is because there's that sort of time frame when we're deciding what we should do with the dynamics once we get a feel for how everything's coming together. In grade 5, it would be blatantly obvious where I would want to apply the dynamics. For me, it would be absolutely straightforward. It would be blatantly obvious. So for example, I would have, and things that would be commonly found would be 13-stroke rolls and 7-stroke rolls and the like. So I would probably have a little balance between flat 13-stroke rolls and crescendoed. Okay, decrescendoed, probably not. Harder to control the end of a decrescendoed roll. Easier to crescendo. Very easy to play flat. And in order to get everybody playing together, they should be playing to the lead drummer, and the lead drummer should be absolutely making that point clear. No, guys, we need to crescendo that. Okay. At a certain level, for example, I don't use 5-stroke rolls in grade 5 level drum scores because they're too difficult. And so it would be absolutely rare to find a 5-stroke roll in a drum score written by myself for grade 5 level. And so when you get to grade 4, you will start to find them in scores. But while you're playing at a certain level, you're working on the things that you're going to need to get to the next level. So, for example, I only teach 5-stroke rolls to be played either at pianissimo or piano. The 5-stroke roll at Mesa 40, 40 or double 40 doesn't exist at grade 5, grade 4 or grade 3. Generally speaking, and grade 3 as well. So when I'm getting people to play 5-stroke rolls in scores, that doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. So when you're teaching that and the explanation behind it, then when they see it in a score, they only know how to play it one way. Okay. One of the things that I've heard over the years in my travels across the continent is people playing drags, because the drag is a little bit of an anomaly to a rudimental repertoire. And unlike the American rudimental drag that comprises a double and a tap, the pipe band drag is a dead stroke and a tap. So I also get everybody to play drags at the appropriate level, and the appropriate level for a drag to be played is pianissimo or piano. Now, drags are hard to play. Drags don't exist in my grade 5 scores. They exist in the very highest level of the grade 4 material. So mid to high level grade 4, you'll start to find drags in. Other things that you won't find in grade 5 material is runs of 30-second notes, or, okay, because it sounds like the skill set is not there. Now, I'm not saying that an individual or individuals within the corps don't have the skill set to do that individually, but when you put 3, 4, 5 people together, it just sounds like, you know, you've been carrying a bag of potatoes up the stairs and the bag burst or something like that, and it just it doesn't sound right at all. So I wouldn't put anything in that couldn't be played at that level, nor would I expect it to be played. So I tend to use a lot of triplets, or. Okay, so there's things that you can do. The melody lines in grade 5 bands are normally simple, and so you can craft lots of things to them by just working with the melody of the tune, working the quarter notes and the eighth notes, and just kind of binding things together. So there's the do's and the don'ts. Don't do that. I would just, like the grade. I guess I'm trying to say in a small way too is I want to make sure that they're given scores that they will succeed at playing. I don't want them to be working on something for months on end, they can't get it, and then they quit. No pipe band in North America has a lineup from the front door and around the building of new people wanting to come in and learn to play the instrument. So I'm mindful of the fact that I'm trying to retain people and make it cool and fun, so they want to keep coming back. So when people can play things together, it's fun, and when they play it well together, it's fun and it's cool. Oh, it's cool. And the other part of it, as much as I hate to say this at times, we need to play the stuff because the pipers need to hear the tune in the drum score. Okay, the most tragic example of nonsense that everybody that's here tonight's probably been exposed to is this. I've done a lot of research on 2/4 and 4/4, and I'm still looking for the 2/4 march that fits. I've actually thought about requisitioning someone to write a score to that rhythm and see what they come up with, because I can't do it the other way. Another interesting fact, this is the kind of stuff that Reid knows because he's a geek, but do you know that over 80% of all 3/4 marches start with a dotted eighth note? Or, but the old mass band score starts on 2 eighth notes. That the opening first 2 notes of the drum score doesn't fit. Period. Period. I have about 55 3/4 marches on file, and I was curious enough to check them all several months ago, and I found, I think, 4 that started with 2 eighth notes, and the rest of them all start 1 and 2. Okay, so how do you expect to play with pipers when the pipers can't hear the melody? You know, and that's why when we put the pipers and drummers together, the ensemble gets loose, because the pipers are trying to play and we're playing, and so they start to play that note that should be cut. They start to play that note early because they think that they must be late because the drummers are playing it earlier than them. And then the pipe major or the piping instructor gets annoyed at the pipers because he's saying, hold the downbeat, don't play the second note so quickly. But the drummers are not doing that. Well, why are they not? Because they don't know how the tune goes, or they've got a lousy score, or both. Because if they knew how the score went and they had a good score and if somebody was helping them, they would know to hold it. Okay? Scotland the Brave. So that version of Scotland the Brave would go something like this. There you go. Now, I've never really heard anybody play Scotland the Brave like that yet, although I'm not saying that you couldn't do it, but it's not the traditional way that the tune goes. So, getting locked into what's appropriate, what are the kind of things that you could be playing at certain levels, not overreaching. Like, for example, if you have a really good score and you move it from grade 5 to grade 4, why do you need to change it? If the pipers are keeping the tune, are they going to make the tune more difficult? No. Why? Because they don't need to. A good tune's a good tune. Okay? A good tune doesn't need to be complicated. Maybe it sounds amazing because it's so simple. It's like, you know, wow, I never thought of that. You know? It's really cool. So, appropriate material. Where does the bass come in when we play this stuff? What's their role in it? Okay? Fundamentally, let me tell you the biggest lie in pipe band. The bass drummer's there to keep the beat. Not true. Do you think that Alan Bevan, Richard Parks, all those guys are going to let the bass drummer set the tempo and the beat for the band? Pipe major's foot keeps the beat. The bass drummer is the foundation. The foundational sound of the band comes from the middle, the bass drum. The tuning of the bass drum and what it plays. So for example, we'll talk about Scotland the Brave a little bit because it's an easy melody to work with and everybody knows how the tune goes. So, lots of bass drummers, when they play Scotland the Brave, okay, it's like chopping wood. Okay, doesn't really fit. Okay, so fundamentally, the bass should only play notes that are in the melody, and they have to be careful not to play little notes. For example, brum brum ba bum, brum brum ba bum bum ba da. I wouldn't write the short note in there in my bass score. Why? Well, because the bass sound is so voluminous and so big that as soon as you played the second note, it would cancel out any part of the first note in the, because the head is so big. So the bass part to something like that would go brum, brum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, bum, brum, ba-da, da, ba. Now, by the way, if you listen to that, you would notice that bars 1 and 2 are exactly the same in the bass for both bars. But the rhythmic structure is the same, but for the same reason I wouldn't get the bass to play the short note in bar 1, I wouldn't ask them to play it in bar 2 for the same reason. It's not going to work. It's not going to be heard. Okay? And then the tenor, they would do something pretty straightforward. Dum, dum, da, and da, da. Now, we also have a flourishing component to the tenor. Okay? So if you want to allow your tenors to flourish, then give them space to flourish and don't junk up the score. There will be times to put stuff in a score and they can put stuff in the score. For example, where triplets occur. So Scotland the Brave that I would play, so absolutely amazing place for the tenor drummers to play a paradiddle with you. Okay? I might even not get the bass drummer to play there. Why? So I can hear the tenors a little bit more. Okay? And then when the bass comes back in with its prowess of sound, it will have even larger impact when it comes back in. There might not be many drummers on tonight, Jim, that would remember the legendary Luke Allen that played with the 78 Fraser Highlanders. But Luke was absolutely amazing and a genius when it came to space. And what made it so amazing was he would go always at times a little bit longer than you thought he should have before he came back in. And the tension that he would build by not coming in was epic. And so when people would say, what did the bass drummer do there? It was so amazing. And I didn't do anything. Technically, he did nothing to make this, and the score was better because he didn't do anything. So again, a classic example of less is more. For example, most of you will recognize the tune The Rowan Tree. He and do, do, the easiest way to kill the rowan tree is to play a and a do, or a do, all that noise going on. Can you imagine the loudest instrument in the band making all that noise? How deafening is something like that? Aha, brum, anti, ando, anti, aro. There you go. The bass part writes itself, okay? And the snare drum score isn't particularly busy either. A little colour in there, a little colour, just to put a little bit in, you know? So that's all it needs, but it needs lots of foundation, and all the foundation should be connected. All the foundation should be connected. When you build a house, you don't dig the foundation in there, lay the cement there, and put the little bit around the bottom over there. You know, yeah, they actually all belong in the same plot, right? So that's kind of like, that's how you put scores together. That's how you build the foundation. Everybody playing together. The tenor drummers need to understand 100% where their notes lie in relation to the snare drum score. 100%, not sort of. Sort of? What's sort of? They need to know how their score works. Okay, that would be like me knitting you a pair of gloves for Christmas and only putting 3 fingers and a thumb and then asking you, oh, but just make it work. That's kind of what people do. You know, can't make something work that doesn't fit. So the tenor drummers need to know how they are scored. The tenor score needs to line up 100% with the snare score. And the bass score is lined up 100% with the music. And sometimes its bias leans one way a little bit more than the other, depending on the effect that you're looking for. And sometimes that could be less, sometimes, you know. And sometimes it could be just keeping it nice and straight and simple, not looking for too much to do. So improving a chord at any level is getting the right scores, getting the right appropriate level scores for that grade. Don't bite off more than you can chew, and making sure that all the pieces go in the one direction. When I personally compose, I have the bass and tenor scores going on in my head at the same time. I can't just write a snare score without having an idea what's going to happen with the whole other bit. I mean, it would be, I've never been in that. When I write a score, I would say that the snare score comes, and then when it comes to putting it down on paper, I always go with the bass, and then I fill in the blanks with the tenor. Now, other people might do it the other way, tenor first, then the bass, and I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with that. I just like, to me, the bass is so important. So important. And then I can get the tenor to fill in the other stuff. And also, I like the deep sound of a bass. You know, like that's the way it can lift the whole thing. So I have a bias towards maybe on occasion using the bass to get an effect over using some tenor in a certain thing. That's kind of the way that my boat floats when it comes to stuff like that. It's just a personal thing there. Snare, bass and tenor, and sometimes the tenor score will change as well if the chips go in a certain direction. How can you improve your drum score and their chip playing? Okay, play predictable chip. The chips that you play in grade 5 should be so predictable a piper could play them. There you go. That's how predictable they should be. Shouldn't be anything aloof, okay? 90% of all pipe band drummers, like 90% of all people on the planet, use the right hand as their dominant hand. So when you're writing, write with a right bias. Don't try and, if your lead drummer's left-handed and he writes to a left bias, then you may be best getting another lead drummer, because you're never going to get everybody to play that way. I'm left-handed and I was taught to lean right. So that's what I do. I can fluently play everything on either hand, which is kind of cool. But the dominant way that people play is to play from the right. Okay, I've got over 2,000 drum scores on file, and I don't have one single left-handed 13-stroke roll in any score. People might say, Reid, how do you know that? There's got to be one that snuck in there. No, I wasn't that silly. Just wouldn't do it. And so when I'm writing chips, I'm also thinking about in a lower grade 5 and 4 level, coming in on things that are easier on the dominant right hand, not trying to come to the left. Okay? It's amazing how really simple things like, for example, in a grade 5 score, I would probably write on a ratio of 80% to 20% right-handed flams versus left-handed flams. Then when it goes up to grade 4, 60-40. And then after that, you know, figure it out. So what's the difference between playing things when you go to grade 3 versus 4? Well, you see a lot of things, you know, you'll see things that come up. 5-stroke rolls, okay, hardly ever on the left. Why? Because right-handed people don't want to play them on the left. Period. That's it. Don't want to play it. I've had the opportunity over the years to play with some of the most amazing pipe band drummers in the world, Stephen McQuarter being one of them. Stephen's claim is this, that if you are not left-handed, the left-handed 5-stroke roll is the hardest rudiment to play perfectly well if you're right-handed. And he's right. I didn't realize that until we had that really good discussion about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. Might be a little bit longer, but when we get together, we always talk about stuff, things that we find, and just little things. And that came up one night. You know, what's throw it on the table? What's the hardest rudiment to play? I think is how the conversation started, and everybody had something to say. And he had the winning topic that night because we talked about it most of the night, and we all agreed with him. It was just like one of those things that we never really thought about. But on the right, okay, that's why those are all written on the right, even although that doesn't really fit anything. And it kind of sounds like nails on a chalkboard. Okay, so the new cadences, they sound exactly what they're supposed to do. Something to march to, get onto the mass bands and get off. And a nice little stopgap from learning all your basic stuff, finding them in a wee simple drum cadence. And then, so what's the difference between the drum cadence and the score? A score should be crafted to fit the melody. The cadence is something to march along to. No, it's like when you're out in parade. You know, as you're keeping time walking up the street, you hear that all the time. You know, drummers playing that, drum corps playing that. But when you're playing a tune, you should play the tune. Play the tune. Okay? This might offend some of you, and I make no apology if it does, but you know, pipe band snare drummers, they're kind of like the laziest musicians on the planet. That's what they are. Okay, they want to learn. They used to want to just learn the old mass band scores, and then when the pipers would learn a new set of tunes like Three Little Beautiful 2/4 marches or something like that, they would just play the same old. Meanwhile, the pipers are playing all this great tune. Why do the drummers not want to learn it? Because they're lazy, absolutely lazy, and they give us all a bad name. Why would you not want to play a beautiful score to a beautiful tune? And most of the time I would say that the scores that you would be playing that would be appropriate for simple tunes would be actually technically less demanding than the old mass band scores used to be. Okay. Other ways to improve your core, playing as well as playing dominant things on the right hand, is in a lot of bands the drummer is normally the loudest. The person who plays the drums plays the loudest instrument in the band. But as you would all well know, when you're standing in a pipe section, a bagpipe is every bit as loud as a drum. The only people who don't believe that is pipers, but they're not the smartest people on the planet, so we'll just leave it at that. Okay? But a bagpipe is loud, and a snare drum is loud. It's a very loud instrument. Okay? But you don't get the right sound out of any instrument unless you strike it the right way or do with it the correct thing. So, for example, bagpipes, if you don't blow enough air in to get the pressure, you cannot make the bagpipe sound properly. And I've never played a trumpet or a trombone or a tuba, but the same process would be in place. If you just go lightly into a tuba, you ain't going to get any sound. It's just not going to happen. In a drum, when we play a drum, we need to strike the drum harder or hard enough so that we get the whole drum to resonate. Now, you don't have to do that quite as much the deeper the sounds get on the tenors, and you don't have to do that. You have to learn to control the bass and touch a bass drum to get it to resonate properly. You don't whack it. Every now and again we can whack a note on the snare drum, but that would be once in a blue moon. It's not a regular occurrence. I am very big on encouraging everybody in the corps, regardless of what instrument they're playing, a tenor, a bass, or the snare, that don't be frightened to hit a note. Don't be frightened to hit a quiet note quiet, and don't be frightened to hit a loud note loud. People think that the word hit relates to only things that are loud. Hit that note. Well, what if it's a quiet note? Hit it quiet, but you still got to hit it. Don't fish for it. I hate tippy-tappy drumming. You know, where, you know, if you make a mistake while going for a note and it's incorrect, you'll notice right away. And so will your drum buddies standing around you. They'll go, what was that? But the good thing about that is you'll probably not make that mistake ever again, because you'll know at least that was wrong. And so you don't go there. And by encouraging everybody to go for notes, you play with more conviction, and you attack the note, play it. Play the notes in between, bigger notes, play them a little bit quieter, but you're still playing them with conviction. It might just be a little bit quieter, but I think that's a really important thing, is you've got to attack the note, right or left, and play it. Bring the notes out. Don't be frightened to hit the drum. If you want to be a drummer, you've got to be prepared to make a noise. If you don't like playing something noisy, go and learn to play the penny whistle or the piccolo or something like that. Okay? Don't pursue a drum career. Okay? And if you are the bass drummer in the band, fundamentally you should have immense control of time. Okay? If somebody comes to your band and they want to be the bass drummer, the first thing that they should do, the only part of the audition that's important, is ask them what their favourite tune is, and then ask them to clap along while you hum it, or they hum it. And if they can't keep time to their favourite tune, then they'll never play bass in a pipe band, ever, because they have no sense of time, you know. And if they don't know what their favourite tune is, sing your national anthem. Oh, say, can you see? If that's not going to be a bass drummer's position for them. Okay. I think way back in the day, when Jim and I were young kids, I think often bass drummers were hired because they were taller than other people who would frequent the pipe band. So, oh, get that big guy over there, he'll be perfect for the bass drum. The only reason behind that is that the drum somehow was relative to the size of the person, and you know, by that stretch of imagination, Alex Duffert should have been a bass drummer, not a snare drummer. So there you go. I don't know. Any questions coming forth now from anybody? Don't be shy.
Reid, I think the controllable music and dynamics and everything you talked about. One thing I would say maybe you could speak to is how could a lower grade band in particular, what can they do to improve their unison playing?
So they need to rehearse. So I have a saying that I use to my guys at SFU when I'm getting grumpy. I try not to raise my voice anymore like I would have done in my younger days, but sometimes I can make a point, and when I think that people need to realize fundamentally this: when you go home, you practice, and when you come to band, you rehearse. You practice on your time and you rehearse on my time. I'm not having you come here and rehearse and practice on my rehearsal time, because my rehearsal time is everybody's rehearsal time. And so, you know, don't let people participate if they've not been practicing at rehearsal. Okay, but ways to get people to play together, get them when you're playing in a corps, you should be watching and listening, because you pick up lots of things when you're watching and listening. What do you do when you play? Who should you be watching? What should I be watching? So when I play in the band, I look at three things. Alan Bevan's foot, the middle of my drum, and that little tuft of something on the grass that I found as I was getting ready to stop marking time and stand still. There's always something there, okay? I find it. It's, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. It's completely insignificant to everybody except for me in that next few minutes when I'm playing. Now, that helps me focus. The other people, the people that stand next to me, they are on either side. They should be watching me, but not all the time. They should also pay attention to the middle of the drum. They should not be lollygagging around and looking at everybody else though. That's definitely not going to help any good playing. But they should be completely clued in to how things are being played to the right and to the left. So if you stand right next to me, you would listen to me and the person on the outside. But if you stand further away from me, you would listen. You don't necessarily listen to me, you watch me. Because if you're out on the flank, you can't hear me really play anyway, because you're too far away. And certainly I can't hear the people who play on the flank play, period, because they're too far away. And so, but if you have a smaller core, like maybe 4 or 5, you know, you can hear just a little bit more, but the same kind of thing. You always pay attention to so if you're on the right flank, you're always paying attention to playing with the drummer who's on your left. You're always watching the lead drummer. Okay, so maybe your eye contact is middle of your drum, lead drummer, and a little bit paying attention to the person that you're playing next to as well. Although your ear's probably more focused. As a core gets larger, your focus goes to the person that plays next to you, because the lead drummer could possibly be too far away really to hear, you know, when you're in the circle. But rehearsing how things are to be played. If you don't know, ask. It's the lead drummer or the drum teacher's responsibility to, you know, to crescendo. Well, how can we make that crescendo quiet? Well, maybe if we start it quieter, so everybody has to buy into, we're going to start that really quiet. One of the things I'm quite big on is in every part there's a loudest note. And then if you're playing a 4-parted tune, you've got 4 loudest notes. But overall in that tune, you've probably got the loudest note in the tune. Now, if you think about that lets you think about how your dynamic shape's going to be in every part. Because if we've all agreed that X is that's X, that's the loudest note. If you play a note louder than that, then somebody's messed up, right? And so if you think about that, that can also help with the dynamic shape, okay? Then in the next part, there'll be one probably in a different place and blah, blah, blah. And then you might have determined that we're going to make that big loud note in the 3rd part. That's going to be the big kahuna note in the entire march. And so having little references like that help the dynamics of how you're playing and how you put it together. Knowing that, you know, and making sure that other notes might be exactly the same volume as anything else. I'm just going to grab a piece of music that's floating around here. So if I were playing a little phrase here, so now I've got 2 accented flams in that little passage, so absolutely no note can be played louder than that. And if somebody does, then that person's kind of out of sync. And when you're playing notes at different weights, there's a bleed of sound that gets loose, and the tightness is not there because it's a little bit, just a little off, you know? It's just not being played with the same accuracy. There's a crispness that would definitely not be there. And so you have to go for notes the same way. Now, in a drum corps, I have I don't know, 11 drummers in the corps, and not everybody plays at the same volume. There's 1 or 2 who play louder than me. There's one or two who play quieter than me. I don't really know. But we all play within a very close volume range. And the way that we interpret it is not the people who play the loudest. I can't actually really tell you off the top of my head who they might be. And it doesn't really matter. They don't play the accented notes quieter to compensate for the ones who can't play them loud enough. They play it how they play it. And it then all fits together very tightly and very accurately because they're playing it with the same gusto as the person who's standing next to them, who might not have quite the same volume naturally when they deliver accents and stuff like that, but it's all being delivered the same way. If the person who happens to be a bit of a heavier player takes something off that note to try and match, then they're not playing the note the same way, and by doing that, things can get just a little bit untidy. So that's where the execution gets a little bit fuzzy sometimes. You need to know the notes, you need to hit the notes, and you need to practice this stuff at home, and you need to come ready to rehearse. That's fundamentally the bottom line. And I think a lot of people over the years have always talked about, oh, I've got to go to practice tonight, and they think that when they walk in the hall, that's when they practice, and then when they go home, they throw their drum bag with the music and the sticks and the pad in the corner until they need to pick it up when they go back to their next practice. So I never use the word. I always ask people if they practice at home. I said, have you been practicing at home? Especially when I'm talking to students. So when I'm dealing with younger ones versus adults, if I explain a situation to an adult and I say, you need to work on that a little bit more at home. Try and find 20 minutes to half an hour every day. It's not hard. Nobody's not that busy. Okay, nobody's not that busy. So you can find that when I'm working with youngsters, don't tell them to practice for half an hour. Okay, anybody under the age of 15 has got no idea how long half an hour is. They haven't got the faintest idea. And if they have it on their phone, when it comes up to 15 minutes, up to past 15 minutes, they'll think there's something wrong with their phone. By the way, they don't think there's anything wrong with their phone up until that point. It's when it goes longer than they thought it was that they'll question that there's something wrong with their phone. So what I do with youngsters is I get them to practice things a certain amount of times. So it becomes a number. I need you to go home and every day for practice time, I want you to play this, this, and this 50 times, 20 times, 100 times. If they're having a problem with a 2-bar end phrase, you need to practice that 100 times every day. Do you know how long it takes you to play a 2-bar end phrase of a 2-4 march 100 times? Does anybody know? It takes approximately 5 minutes. But if I tell a youngster that I want them to go home and practice it for 100 times, they'll go and do it. If I tell them to practice it for 5 minutes, you'll get 2 minutes and something out of them, but it won't even hit 2.5 minutes because they have no idea how long 2.5 minutes are, and they don't want to know. So if you've got youngsters in your core, give them a number of times that they have to play through this, and they might not play it 100 times, but they'll play it enough. And some of them, boys tend to be a little bit more driven with a number like that. Girls are just overall smarter and they just do all the things that they need to do. That's just the way they are. I don't mean that in a sexist way, it's just my findings over the years. Girls are way smarter at getting to the finish line before boys. Boys are scatterbrained, a lot of them.
Brian Key had a question in the chat. Brian, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I was just trying to get at, in terms of dynamics, some of the scores I have don't have dynamics like written, like pianissimo, forte, double forte written on the scores. I wanted to know, when you get the finished product, Is that transcribed on the actual composition? What do you do in your band?
Okay, I don't write any dynamics on it at all. It will be up to how it, I have a very good idea how at least 75% of it's going to go, and so would everybody else. The other stuff is kind of, it's how the piece evolves based on delivering things and trying to make it sound interesting, not make it sound like it's the same as a tune that we've previously played. So that would have it. And also, I would say that when I hand out scores to students for solos, when a student gets up to that grade 1 solo level and the pro level, I like to think that they're playing where they could maybe suggest what the dynamics would be that works best for them. Like, well, how would you play that? Oh, that's pretty darn good. So go with that. That's not how I would play that, but how I play it dynamically isn't set in stone. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like that by every single player. If it's a solo piece, when it's a band piece, that's when the lead drummer has to step in and say, well, I prefer it we play it that way, so moving forward everybody play it that way. That's it. That's why they pay lead drummers way more money than they do the rank and file guys in the drum corps, who normally got an extra couple of zeros on the end of their paycheck every month on that one. So that's how we are the big.
Ken Heiner, you had a question about setting up a band practice and how to organize a practice, it sounded like. You want to go ahead and ask that one?
Yes, sir. I was just kind of try and get his opinion on rehearsal night structure. Currently, we have student time from like 6 to 6:45, full band starting at 7. Is there any other kind of setup you would recommend, like, structured time slots just for dedicated instruction, followed by drum section warm-ups, score work after that, then full band circle? Or is there something that seems to work better for you and your group? Right now, we have one bass, 2 tenor drummers, and 5 to 6 snares that regularly show up. 3 or 4 of them are fairly new kids in the circle. So we want to make sure we're, like you said, we're keeping their attention while still trying to drive them forward.
So I don't think you should, when you warm up, you should warm up when you're working on something. Like I said earlier, you're not coming to practice. So if you're going to practice, you would warm up at home and then you would practice the things that you need to work on. When you come to rehearsal, you're coming and you're turning the switch on. Now, when we get to rehearsal with our band, we might take a few minutes and play something a bit light that we can easily play as a warm-up, but then we're right into it. There's no anything like that, and I would say that happens with the other bands when they're working with scores. In the fall, when we're working on rudiments and things like that with students that we might want to start using in scores, when we get as they get the scores, we would take them through stuff like that. That's in the teaching capacity, but in a rehearsal capacity, I think at the end of the season, and when we get into the winter segment of the year, we tend to spend a little bit of time working on fundamentals separately and then playing together, and then that starts to change. I always think that pipe bands are a bit weird, so that, I guess, is myself. Like, most pipe bands wait till the season ends before they pick their new material. Like, why? This seems like a complete waste of time. Why don't I have the tunes all picked out? Maybe whoever does your score writing for you could have the scores ready, so that as the band is finalising the end of the year and they've gone to the last competition, maybe at Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, or Stone Mountain, Georgia, or wherever, the thing that should be waiting for everybody upon return from an event like that is, by the way, that new material that I told you I was going to send out, it's in your Dropbox. Start taking a look at that so we can get ready to take a look at the new music at our first practice after we've had this 2-3 week break. That's called being organised. But most people wait and then they get back to band 2 or 3 weeks after the last contest of the season and then they start to kick around what they're thinking about playing. And so by the time they make the determination of that, Thanksgiving's coming up. Well, I know that in the US, after Thanksgiving, there ain't much getting done at all. You know, the big guy in the red suit, he's the big focus. Everybody's doing that in Canada. Our Thanksgiving comes a wee bit earlier, but it doesn't necessarily make that process any better just because it comes in early October instead of late November. I think that bands need to be better organized at getting on top. You know, like if you've got all your competition medley up and running and it's going well, and you're at rehearsal and it's going well, by the time midway point of the season comes around, you should be starting to maybe think about tunes that you're going to play next year. Where are you going to play them? You might not know. You don't even need to know. You might not even, you know, if you're the pipe major, you might not want to even suggest that you're going to bring in this tune to replace a certain tune, because then people might start practicing it less at home, even although they still have to play it at another few contests. People are funny that way. But getting organized that way. When we rehearse and when I do work with groups, when I'm asked to help them out, I like to hear the drummers on the pads and the tenors and bass on the drums, so I can hear them, and I want to hear how well their pieces are fitting the snare score without the noise of the snare drum interfering. So our tenor drummers and bass drummer pretty much play on drums all the time. And the snare drummers, and then we'd flip on a little bit of drum and in with the pipers. Sometimes we don't flip onto drums and we just go right in with pipers. It depends on what you're trying to get achieved. I think that, like for example, our season starts in May, so we're almost at the point now where we don't rehearse on drum pads. We just rehearse on the drums all the time. Kind of no point, you know. And then we're building up our stamina, physical stamina, to stand and play, concentrate really hard, and just kind of do it. So should all be working. So, you know, like you should not be putting the final touches to the memorization the weekend before the first competition of the season. That should be done several weeks before, where you're not referring to any music. That doesn't mean that you're not making the odd mistake. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But what I am saying is that you shouldn't have your music open and playing from a sheet of music the weekend before the first competition of the season. That's obviously because you haven't practiced at home, and now you're practicing openly at rehearsal time, that's not fair, not good, you know. It's sometimes all about creating a good culture, a positive culture, where people, coming to band tonight, I can't wait to get my drum on and rehearse with the band. I've been practicing all week, and all those things that were bugging me last week, I've got them memorized, I'm playing them really good. You get the band and it goes okay. You know how you get that? It's like you think you've got some things memorized, and then you get playing with everybody and you get a few mistakes. But that's what rehearsal is for. It's to wash out the times when you might make mistakes. And that's it. So if you're still sight reading and trying to play scores, you know, within a month of the season starting, it's not going to go well. Start of the season, you know. I would not have anybody in my corps playing. They'd be like, I would just say, it's obvious that you are not going to be able to play at that contest in 3 weeks' time. So keep working away. I'll bring you into the line when I think it's appropriate, but as we get closer to the event, you're going to have to sit up and take a look at that next one, you know. And I do that with the kids as well. They kind of would know that this is what you need to do. You know, if you don't want to do it, then
Martina, you had a question about the number of tunes to play?
Yes, I was, you were talking about starting to think about new music mid-season and getting the music early and all that. How many tunes in a 5-tune medley or an MSR for a grade 4 band here in the States, or what we call a QMM, which is basically 6 parts of music. How many of those tunes would you change every year?
Eight parts of music, Martina.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Well,
okay.
I'm in a different association.
We should all be the same when it comes to the QMM, but go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that depends. Like for example, if you're playing a tune, a few tunes, and you seem to play it well, and you seem to be positively commented on that particular tune, you might want to keep that tune as an anchor to replacing others. Don't kick out your best tune until there's another one that's challenged it and it's maybe the best, when you're trying to keep new material in. I mean, if you think that you can handle the workload, you could always change the whole thing. But if you start changing it October 1st, so if it's changed and you've got the music and then you come to your first band rehearsal on the 1st of October, then you've probably got 7-8 months before the season starts again to get it going. But if you wait until, a week before Thanksgiving, before you've decided on what the new material is going to be, well, nobody's going to practice it. There's too many football games on the TV leading up to Thanksgiving. Nobody's going to have the time to look at drum scores and pipe music. And then, oh my goodness, there's these things called Christmas sales and the big guy in the red suit and all that stuff. And well, people just you can't get to practice when nobody can compete against the guy in the big red suit. I mean, everybody knows that, so then you wait. And so things that you could have had done before you got to Thanksgiving, you try to implement them right before Thanksgiving and it doesn't work. So, but get rid of tunes that you're not, let's say you've played at 5 or 6 competitions and the judges have been varied in who they are, but there's a common theme about what they're saying about a certain tune. If they're saying that tune's good, very well played, don't get rid of that tune. If they're saying that another tune or tunes are not so good, get rid of those maybe. If you get a consistency in comments that say, perhaps this tune is a little bit too demanding for this level, get rid of that tune. Just get rid of it. Get rid of it. And find another one. You know how many? There's over 15,000 tunes out there. Okay, and some of the really most beautiful, simple tunes, grade 5 bands can play. Lots of them. Grade 5 and 4 bands, no problem at all. Finding material, none whatsoever. Just go and find them. Easy to find as well. They're not hard to find. So.
Andrew Hornicke, you had a question or a comment about the selection of the tunes?
Yeah, I thought I would ask. Reid, you've got decades of working with kind of a small handful of really astute pipe majors. For those of us who are leading drummers, and I'm looking at the gallery here, and there's a bunch of people who are leading bands right now here in the Midwest. There seems to be a habit that has formed and continued over probably far too long of waiting, of pipe majors who are responsible for picking those tunes, waiting until the last possible minute and putting us lead drummers and or score writers or whatever at a disadvantage. How do you start to right that ship?
Right away. Just don't do it. Somebody comes to you and say in like mid-February and say, yeah, I'd like to play this tune in the medley. Say, you know what? I'd love to play it in next year's medley as well, but it ain't happening right now. That's it. Simple as that. Simple.
Oh no, I think sorry. I think what I meant is like there's a tendency for people to wait too long.
Yeah.
I'm getting tune selections in September, October to try and get the core, get the it takes time to write a good drum score, I mean that's part of what was being spoken about here already this evening. And then we the composers and the leaders are being and the drumming side, the percussion side being disadvantaged by pipers putting it off for
Yeah,
whatever reason. That's a communication thing, but it's a core management thing. So I just wondered what sort of tips you might have for changing that perspective on the piping side if we can guide our counterparts.
I would say that of the pipe majors that I've played with in the last 40 years since I immigrated, every single one of them has known that good scores take some time, and so we should be on it right away. Now, that doesn't mean that every now and again something hasn't worked and we're changing something in the late winter, like a tune's just not working. Now, when that happens, for me, it would not be done unless I don't. For example, I don't write a drum score in SFU to a tune that I don't like. Simple as that. No, I don't like that tune. I don't know. And then, and I send Alan. I don't know. It varies from year to year, but every year I'll send them about 10 tunes that I think that might work somewhere. I say, hey, da 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 da, blah blah blah, and that's it. And I go on the premise that if he doesn't use any of them, the ones that we are playing are better for what we want to do, and I'm fine with that. I also know that if there's anything he picks and I don't like it, I just message him and say, I like da da da, but this one here, never like that tune. I can't, I don't see it, and he'll just move on to something else. Just because there's so many other things out there. And I would say that he's well aware of the fact that if he's wanting the drum corps to play really, really well, then it's easy to play something you like. You think about this, you're in the car, driving along, got the radio on, and your least favourite song comes on. What do? Listen to it to make sure it's still your least favourite song? No, you change to the next station in the hope that a more pleasurable song will come on. Everybody does that. So it's kind of the same when you have to write scores to tunes as well. So I would say that when we at SFU, it's always been a working partnership. When I joined SFU, when Terry was the pipe major 30 some years ago, we worked together on tunes. It's probably easier in the MSRs to find stuff, because an MSR is an MSR. A medley, you're always trying to find that little niche that might make things go just that little bit different. So, but everything needs time, and I would say that the time that you need to get things right in grade 5 and 4 is a little bit more than you need in grade 3 into grade 2. And then when like a grade 1 band, people in the band should be able to turn something around within 3 months. Bang. And when you listen to them, the people listening would never know that they've been playing all the tunes for 6 months and only that one for 3. You should not at that level. Now, when I say a tune, I'm talking about maybe a 2-parted tune. So we're talking 8, 16 bars of music. If you cannot, then that's a whole different thing. But I wouldn't want to do that in a grade 5 band, and I wouldn't want to do that in a grade 4 band, and I would be very reluctant to do it in a grade 3 band. Like, you want to give them time to get it, because as you go up a little bit, you're maybe picking tunes that are a little bit more demanding and they need a little bit more time. And so, but the pipe major should be talking to lead drummers, and lead drummers should be talking to pipe majors about tunes and things like that. It's not a British Army military sort of way of doing it. I would never subscribe to that ever. It's like, I don't have all the ideas, and Alan would be the first person to tell you that in the SFU pipe band, he doesn't either. Sometimes we have to be the referees, and then I always defer every major decision then at, what way do you fancy going? I said, Alan, you pick. Everything's really good here. no choice is going to be a bad choice. Just go with your gut, and that's it. So we come out the other end normally pretty good, you know.
Reid, we have a question here from somebody who their microphone is not working, so I'll just read it here. He has a question about rehearsals. We have 15 snare drummers, but only about half compete, and the skill levels are all very different from competition drummers to those who are not. How should we structure rehearsal with that aspect when non-competition drummers want to be included or need help with the basics?
Yeah, that's a little bit tough. They should probably come out earlier, and you should probably have it structured where, as the evening progresses, the opportunity for them to continue declines. So that you start with 15, and for the last half an hour, 45 minutes, you end up with only the ones that play. And then everybody would know that if you're in the first group that can't get to the next level where more people get to play, that's the level they've got to aspire to get to play for a little bit longer. I would think that that's the best way to sort of go about that. You know, 15 drummers is a lot of drummers. That's a lovely position to be in. You know, and we should all be trying to progress. So if you find that, for example, if I was working with a group and 18 months had gone by and the same 4 or 5 people weren't improving, I would suggest to them that they're not a good fit, because what they end up then doing is they take away time from those who are practicing at home and coming to rehearse. And if they don't want to get, what you don't want to do is, you don't want to lose the better players who feel like too much time has been donated to the not so good players. You've got to find that balance. And if you've got people who are just part of the organization because they're there as a performance band, so when they've got St. Paddy's Day parade, 4th of July parade, and those kind of things, then they can play those pieces well, and you play them for however. Now you could also have it set up so that they can practice as a separate component when the rehearsal continues. There's nothing to say that you can't do that, so they can get a chance to go through all the little pieces that they play. But I would say dropping them out as you progress and leaving a good solid 45 minutes at the end for the people who are part of the competition band is good. At least by then, everybody in the competition band will be well warmed up playing on drums and stuff like that, so they should be able to just get right to it, you know?
All right, we got another unworking microphone here. Bad night for microphones. The question is, speaking of volume and dynamics on the bass drum, how do you judge if one is playing too soft or too loud in the circle?
Stand outside the circle and listen. You know, well, I do that, and Alan would do that, and I would get somebody else on the court to do it as well, so that they can hear it from a perspective of me playing, and then them just taking going back behind the core, maybe having a little wander up, seeing how it is. You listen, and if it sounds too loud, it's probably too loud. If you think it sounds too loud, you go and talk to the people involved, not necessarily the bass drummer, but you go and talk, and then if you go and have a listen, and you think, yeah, you know what, you're right, it's a bit loud there, then you should go then and talk to the bass drummer and say, in part da-da-da, line 1 or 2, this is a bit loud, can we tone it down? If it's a general thing, just say, tone it down just a little bit, let's just let it, be a bit calmer, but you have to listen. And a lot of people that play bass drum would tell you that they rely on the feedback as to how loud their instrument is, because they often can't hear themselves because they're in that blind spot for the sound on the drum, because it's right there, So listening is definitely get people to listen on your behalf, because you don't want to be too loud, and you certainly don't want to be unheard. And so it's all about getting it just right, you know.
Well, does anybody else have any questions for Reid? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Martina, you have one? Go ahead.
Sorry. Speaking of, well, not speaking of, in grade 5, Andrew, don't laugh. In grade 5 and grade 4 bands, how many tenor voices would you compete with?
You could come, well, it depends on the size of the band, but I wouldn't say, because, for example, let's say you had 6, and you had 3 or 4 snares and 8 pipers. People might say, wow, that band's got too many tenor drums. Now, in my band, that wouldn't be a problem, because none of the there's no 2 tenor drummers hit the drum at the same time.
Hey.
We've got a discord in how the drums are tuned, and so that would be bad. And so while there is the perception visually that that band has a lot of tenor drums, the reality is that there's not one time when all 6 drums are being played at the same time. There's not one time when 2 drums are being played at the same time. So you could play with half a dozen, you know. One of the things I noticed when I was at Alma, Michigan last year judging was how poor some of the bands sounded, only because they didn't seem to form up properly. The gaps between drummers were irregular, the drummers were too spread out. There would be a drum corps of 3 drummers, and there would be one behind the pipe sergeant's flank and one behind the pipe major's flank and one in the middle, but you couldn't really hear the 3. And then when they got into the circle, they were too focused on trying to create a circle and not standing close enough so you could hear the drum corps. And I thought that there was at least half of the bands I wish I could have said, stop, stand this way, go and practice it for 10 minutes and come back. And they would have been instantly better doing nothing more than learning how to stand together. I noticed that. And to be perfectly honest, I do notice it when I judge from time to time, because I actually judged twice last year at Alma, Michigan, and at Seaside Games in California, and I noticed the same thing. Standing too far apart, or the bass drummer's too far into the circle, or like, you know, depending on how big the band is, you have to make tweaks to how you set it up to best allow a good sound. But I found that was an interesting sort of thing I noticed about that competition. Those 2 competitions that I judged was just that the bands could have done so much more to improve how they sounded just by standing in a way that would allow that to happen, and done nothing else.
We're coming up on time here. Anybody else have anything? All right. Well, I got a couple of things that I'm going to talk about real quick. We have 2 more in our seminar here for our education series. April is going to be on Pembroke with Jack Lee, and May is going to be how to set your band up on a day of a contest with Pipe Major Richard Parks. So we got 2 good ones coming up. Spread the word amongst your bandmates, and there should be 2 more good ones. We've had some great ones. I thought this one was really, really good. Reid, thank you very much. And I'll go ahead and give you the commercial here. Reid came out with a book that is a really, really, really good book. It really encompasses everything in regards to rudiments. It's called Taking No Shortcuts. It came out at the end of last year. I would highly recommend you get that book. You can get that book as well as his son Grant's new book with a lot of scores, which just came out today, right, Reid?
Yes, just released at 4:30 this afternoon, Vancouver time.
There you are. So a half hour before we started. And you can get both of those books at takingnoshortcuts.com. I would certainly recommend it. I haven't seen Grant's obviously yet, but I'm sure it's good. But Reid's is top notch, really, really good. So I would certainly do that. And I would just add one comment to the first part of what Reid was talking about tonight with score composition, how the scores are composed, the bass drumming, the tenor drumming. He was giving you all an excellent class on ensemble. That is really what ensemble is to a large degree. So if you're not doing what he says in the drum score, it's also going to affect your ensemble score. So keep that in mind. Reid, can't thank you enough. Thank you very much, pal.
Jim, thanks a lot. Nice to see you, albeit that we're online, but thanks so much for the invite. I hope people got something out. If you would like to get more out, you can always reach me. I'm quite easy to find on social media, on Facebook, and good luck to everybody competing in the 2024 season. I know that I'm looking forward to our 2024 season, so I wish you guys all the very best for the year. And if there's a little things that you've maybe picked up here, maybe even just one thing that you can maybe use, then awesome. And good luck with it.
Thanks again, Reid. We'll see you down the road. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, Andrew, for the questions, by the way. Jack Cox, nice to see you.
Long time no see, Reid.